I bought that little brick building on Hawthorne Avenue because I wanted boring, quiet retirement, steady tenants, no drama. After 30 years working federal construction logistics, I'd had enough meetings, enough red tape, enough people using fancy words to take shortcuts. I figured a 2-story building with 4 small office suites and a shaded parking lot would be simple. The tenants were good people, a physical therapist, a small accounting office, a dog groomer, and an antiques couple who argued about lamps but always paid on time. The lot was part of the deal. It was private, clearly inside my parcel line, and it made the whole place work. Then one Tuesday morning, I walked out back with a cup of coffee and saw 3 brand new signs stabbed into my gravel like somebody was planting flags. Stonebridge HOA, community parking, 2-hour limit, tow enforced. I just stood there blinking. Because that lot wasn't community, anything. It was mine. On the deed, on the county map, and on the tax bill I paid every year without missing a beat. At first, I honestly thought it was a mistake. Stonebridge is a residential HOA behind my building. My front faces the main road. The back driveway brushes their subdivision near a walking trail. We'd coexisted for years. But recently they'd repaved their trail, and I'd seen more joggers and dog walkers cutting through. Still, nobody had ever tried to claim my asphalt like it belonged to them. So I pulled the signs out carefully and leaned them against my brick wall. Like, hey, somebody dropped these. By lunchtime, a pearl-white SUV rolled up, and out stepped the HOA vice president. Let's call her Janice Crowell. She had a sharp bob haircut, sunglasses big enough to block the sun, and basic empathy, and a clipboard hugged to her chest like it gave her authority. She didn't greet me. She pointed at the signs and said, "Sir, those need to go back where they were." I took a slow sip of coffee. "No, ma'am," I said. "They were on my property." Janice smiled like I was a child misunderstanding a rule. "There's a shared-use corridor," she said, tapping the clipboard. "The association expanded trail access. Your lot borders the corridor, so it's part of community visitor flow." "Visitor flow," I repeated. "You mean my tenants' parking?" She shrugged. "It's a temporary adjustment. 2-hour limit. It reduces congestion for residents." I stared at her and felt something old wake up in my chest. That familiar feeling from my working days when someone used vague language to push boundaries and counted on you being too tired to argue. "Did the board ask permission?" I said. "Or did you just decide my land was a community project?" Her smile tightened. "You were notified," she said. The trail improvement brochure went to all adjacent properties. I hadn't even opened that glossy brochure. It was one of those mailers full of smiling families and words like amenity and enhancement that usually mean, "We're about to inconvenience you." "Janice," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I pay taxes on this lot. It's not HOA common area. Remove your signs." That's when she switched from polite to pointed. "Then perhaps we should review whether your commercial use remains compliant with updated neighborhood guidance." There it was, the threat, wrapped in a sentence you can deny later. She turned and walked back to her SUV like she'd just won something. That week was chaos. Clients pulled in, saw the signs, and panicked. The accountant's customers started parking on the street and getting dirty looks from Stonebridge homeowners. The dog groomer had people calling to ask if they'd get towed for a 20-minute appointment. My physical therapist tenant nearly lost a patient's car to a tow truck because someone decided 2 hours was a standard. I called the HOA office. No one called back. And then Friday morning, it escalated. I came in early and found bigger signs, this time bolted into concrete blocks, plus bright yellow paint striping 5 of my spaces with HOA guest only stenciled like they were marking a crime scene. Near the fence was a small storage box labeled Trail Maintenance, planted like it belonged there. I walked the parcel line with my phone and realized half of that box was on my property too. That's when I stopped thinking mistake and started thinking land grab. That night, I opened a metal cabinet in my office I hadn't touched in forever, the one where you keep boring papers you pray you never need. Deed, survey, closing documents, a folder labeled Prior Agreements. I flipped through it mostly to calm down, like, here's proof you're not crazy. Then I found the one page that changed everything. Years before I bought the building, the previous owner had signed a limited use license with the HOA. It wasn't for community parking. It was for a tiny seasonal event, 3 parking spaces, 8 Saturdays a year, daytime only, in exchange for a token fee. A neighborly handshake on paper. But buried at the bottom was the clause that mattered. Any use beyond that schedule required written renewal at market rate, and unauthorized expansion would be billed retroactively as commercial occupancy. I actually smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was clean. It was the kind of quiet leverage people like Janice never expect, because they assume the other person doesn't have the paperwork or the patience or the backbone. I called an old friend, Wes, a retired city planner who still treats zoning maps like sacred text. We met for coffee across the street, and I slid the agreement over like a card dealer. Wes whistled. "They're going to hate this," he said. "Good," I replied. "I want to hit them hard, but clean." He told me to get a current market valuation for commercial public use parking rights. Then I met with a local attorney, Simone Park, sharp as a scalpel and calm as a judge. She reviewed the documents and said, "They're exposed. Signs, paint, tow enforcement, interference with business operations, trespass with that maintenance box. If they want to act like tenants, you bill them like tenants." "I don't want to sue unless they force me," I said. Simone nodded. "Then you give them a choice. Pay what they owe, or vacate and restore." Monday morning, I walked into the HOA office with 8 sealed envelopes, one for each board member, plus my own copy in a leather folder. The receptionist looked up like she wanted to stop me, then decided she didn't get paid enough to be in the blast zone. I opened the boardroom door. 8 people sat around a polished table with coffee cups and glossy printouts, like they ran a bank instead of a neighborhood club. Janice looked up first, smile tight. "Mr. Miles Harper," I said, "and you're going to want to open those." I laid the envelopes down one by one. The board secretary, a smug guy named Brent, tore his open immediately. "What is this?" he snapped. "Your rent bill," I said. That sentence hit the room like a dropped weight. Janice gave a small laugh. "We don't rent from you," she said. I leaned forward. "Then you don't use my lot. But you have been for 6 months like you own it. Here's the agreement your HOA signed. Here's the survey. Here are photos of your signs, paint, and the maintenance box across my line. Here's the valuation." Brent flipped pages like he could reshuffle reality. "You can't just decide to charge us," he said. I held his gaze. "And you can't just decide to take my property." Then I said the numbers, slow and even. Retroactive balance due is $29,740. Monthly rate going forward is $4,350 if you want continued access. You have 72 hours to respond. Otherwise, you vacate within 7 days and restore everything, including removing paint and relocating the box. Janice laced her fingers together and tried to sound composed. "We'll consult legal counsel," she said. "Please do," I replied. "And don't tow another vehicle off my land." I left. By the time I got back to my office, I had voicemails from unknown numbers and an email from a law firm full of polite denial and good faith language, inviting mediation. Simone read it and texted me. "They'll posture. Stay steady." The next day, they tried to tow again. Middle of the day, a flatbed from a company I'd never heard of. And of course, they didn't go after an empty space. They went after the most vulnerable target. A patient of the therapist, a woman who uses a wheelchair, had parked in the closest spot to the ramp, a spot we keep open for accessibility. Overnight, someone had painted a yellow visitor stripe across it. While she was in her session, the tow guy hooked her car like it was nothing. The therapist ran out shouting, but the tow guy shrugged and kept working. Something in me snapped, not into violence, into focus. I walked out, planted myself in front of the truck, and said, "Unhook it. Now." He pointed at the paint. "Contract with the HOA." I pulled out my property records. Private land. Unauthorized marking. "Unhook it, or I call the sheriff." He laughed, so I called. 15 minutes later, a county deputy showed up, looked at my paperwork, looked at the tow truck, and said, "You're done here." The tow guy left cussing. The woman was crying. My tenants were shaken. And I knew for sure, the HOA wasn't just being pushy. They were playing power games with real people's lives. Wednesday night was Stonebridge's General Assembly, the meeting where they stand at a podium and talk about community standards like they're reading scripture. I went. I brought foam boards, photos of the signs in my gravel, the yellow paint, the tow attempt, the maintenance box crossing my parcel line, plus the agreement they'd forgotten. When they opened the floor for comments, I stood. "My name is Miles Harper," I said. "I own the commercial building on Hawthorne Avenue by the trail, the one with the pecan trees and the private lot. Heads turned. A few people nodded. For 6 months, I continued. The HOA has occupied part of my private property without consent or compensation. You installed tow-enforced signage on land you do not own. You painted over parking spaces that serve small businesses and their clients. You attempted to tow a disabled patient from a space my tenants rely on. Janice stepped forward, voice sharp and sweet. Mr. Harper, this is not the appropriate forum. I cut in, louder but controlled. This is exactly the appropriate forum. Because HOA dues are paying for your board's actions, and if you don't pay what you owe, the homeowners in this room will be paying for legal fallout. Murmurs spread. One person clapped. Another asked out loud, "Can they even do that?" Janice's face changed. For the first time, she looked unsure. That's the thing about bullies in formal clothes. They're brave in private, shaky in public. The 72-hour deadline expired with no payment. Just more vague emails. So the next morning, I did what they didn't think I'd do. I tripled the rate overnight. Not because I'm greedy. Because consequences are the only language some people respect. Simone drafted the final notice. If the HOA continued representing my lot as community parking, it would be billed as exclusive commercial occupancy at a premium rate, plus damages for interference and any ADA-related harm tied to their enforcement. I installed my own signs at the entrances, private lot, no HOA authority. By that afternoon, the HOA attorney showed up in person, no smile. Mr. Harper, he said, the association is willing to negotiate. Negotiation starts with removing everything you put on my land and paying what you owe, I said. He tried to soften it. The board believed. The board assumed, I corrected. Assumptions are expensive. The next morning, trucks arrived. Not tow trucks, work trucks. Orange vests. Quiet, urgent compliance. They scraped paint, pulled signs, dragged that maintenance box back over the line like they were erasing a mistake before anyone could photograph it. No one looked me in the eye. No apology. Just fast hands and lowered heads. Then a cashier's check arrived for the full back amount, plus prepaid months, and a letter on HOA letterhead that smelled like a lawyer wrote it with gloves on. Stonebridge HOA acknowledges that recent actions regarding private property adjacent to the trail were executed without proper review. We apologize for the disruption caused to Mr. Harper and his tenants and commit to improved transparency. Not heartfelt, but public. And in that world, public matters. I printed it and posted it on the community bulletin board. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. 2 weeks later, Janice resigned. One sentence on the HOA website. Just gone. The board shuffled. New people stepped in. My lot went back to being my lot. My tenants stopped flinching every time a truck slowed near the entrance. It should have felt like a clean win. But a week after the check cleared, I got a plain yellow envelope with no return address. Inside was a stack of HOA budget pages and email threads, legal fees, consulting payments, infrastructure charges that didn't match anything anyone could see. On top was a sticky note. You weren't the first. You're just the first who didn't fold. I handed it to my attorney and told her to lock it away. Because I didn't buy this building to become a watchdog. I bought it to live quietly. But now I can't stop wondering how many people got pushed around before me. So here's my question for you. And I want honest answers in the comments. If you were in my position, would you have taken their first settlement and moved on? Or would you have demanded the public apology and risked turning the whole neighborhood against you? And do you think HOAs like this are really about community? Or are they a legal costume for people who want control? Drop your story too. If you've ever had an HOA try to claim something that wasn't theirs, or if you've watched rules get weaponized against the wrong person. I want to hear what you saw, what you did, and what you wish you'd done. If you want more stories like this where a quiet person gets underestimated and then flips the whole table with receipts, hit like, subscribe, and tell me which side you're on. Protect the peace or fight the power.